Globalists commonly offer the following as some interrelated examples of threats that they say can only be overcome by regional integration, as these threats transcend national borders. These include terrorism, drug trafficking, money laundering, trafficking of humans in the sex and slave trade, gun running, and climate change, a generic term aimed at minimizing scientific dissent as occurred with the term global warming or the global cooling scare of the 1970s. Never mind that all of these threats are increased in large part by the complicity, dereliction, fabrication, and exaggeration of politicians. Forget that, and just be afraid that all of a sudden in the 21st century, nations are inadequate for the task, and the only answer for dereliction in national governments is an even larger regional government umbrella. Increasingly, plans offered to combat threats such as these will be sold to the public in a regional structure, including regional law enforcement, defense, surveillance, and intelligence. Action plans emanating from the United Nations address all of these problems in such a manner. An example of this approach is the globalist obsession to get guns out of the hands of average citizens. Again, never mind that governments and their contractors are the chief culprits in arming the most despicable despots and their band of criminals. The UN's Program of Action to Combat and Eradicate the Illicit Trade in Small Arms and Light Weapons in all its aspects is the master plan produced from a July 2001 New York City conference. Among the global gun control measures in this UN action plan was a section devoted to the steps to be taken within the regions and subregions, with the aim of concluding relevant legally binding instruments aimed at preventing, combating, and eradicating the illicit trade in small arms and light weapons. In other words, their aim is to give the regions legislative and law enforcement powers. Paragraph 27 includes networks for information sharing among law enforcement, border, and custom control agencies, which is the exact result of the recent Obama-Harper Beyond the Border Action Plan for the U.S. and Canada.
We are agreed, for example, that the best place to deal with trouble is at the continental perimeter, that smarter systems can reduce the needless inconvenience posed to manufacturers and travelers by multiple inspections of freight and baggage.
Outer security perimeters surrounding each region are modeled after the European Union's Schengen zone, allowing for a free flow of cargo, services, and people among the nations within each regional perimeter. Only in this context does the motive for congressional and presidential dereliction in U.S. border security over the past several decades become clear. Such dereliction opens the door for the terrorism and the drug crime chaos pretext that will encourage public acceptance of the regionally integrated law enforcement, military, and intelligence. The Fast and Furious gun-running operation that further empowered Mexican drug gangs is a prime example of this chaos methodology.
The political agenda, again, being stopping guns from going into Mexico because the Mexican government, what is the political agenda?
Their political agenda behind this entire thing was to blame American gun shops for cartel violence in America in order to push an anti-Second Amendment, more regulations on these gun shops.
So that gets a little bit more complicated. You're into the conspiracy thing now, just not the hardware thing about it, that this was a design thing to blame gun shops and try to get Second Amendment rights curtailed.
Well, it's not a conspiracy, it's a fact. We have emails in the book, documentation. The goal from the beginning was force these gun shops in Arizona to sell to these straw purchasers that had been under surveillance. They knew they were the bad guys. They knew they were working for the cartels for a year. And then don't track the guns. They didn't put any tracking devices on the guns. Out of 2,500 guns, Bill, 2 guns had GPS devices put on them. So you tell me if that shows they wanted to really track these guns.
So you see nefariousness from the jump on this.
Zambata Nebla claims that under a divide-and-conquer strategy, the U.S. helped finance and arm the Sinaloa cartel through Operation Fast and Furious in exchange for information that allowed the DEA, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, and other federal agencies to take down rival drug cartels. The Sinaloa cartel was allegedly permitted to traffic massive amounts of drugs across the U.S. from 2004 to 2009, during both Fast and Furious and the Bush-era gun-running operations, as long as the intel kept coming. And there is more. Based on the alleged agreement, the Sinaloa cartel, under the leadership of the defendant's father, Ismael Zambata Nebla, and Chapo Guzman, were given carte blanche to continue smuggling tons of illicit drugs into Chicago and the rest of the United States. They were also protected by the United States government from arrest and prosecution in return for providing information against rival cartels, which helped Mexican and United States authorities capture or kill thousands of rival cartel members. States a motion filed for discovery in United States District Court by Zambata Nebla's attorney in July of 2011. So what you need to know is that members of Congress from both parties should now say, look, let's demand to see everything, every single file connected to Fast and Furious and Operation Gunrunner. That means Republicans should not be focused only on the years when the Obama administration had control. Rather, go back to the beginning during the Bush administration.
When you realize that the federal government has essentially been arming these cartels, what goes through your mind?
We feel it's a betrayal. 42,000 people have been killed. And we also now have our hero in the Border Patrol, as you know, Agent Brian Terry, killed on American soil. 3 guns have been found at the murder scene. All 3 of them were connected to this program.
I want to read something that you said or quoted as saying, if somebody gives a gun to somebody knowing they're going to commit murder, guess what we call them? We call them accomplices. Do you think the ATF have been accomplices to murder?
Absolutely.
So you're saying what they were doing was criminal?
Absolutely. Not just these individual agents, but people up the chain of command who have made the decision.
It is already well established that officials in other regions have now publicly stated their goal of deeper political and monetary integration with a common currency for their respective regions. However, North American globalists, at least those in the U.S., have adhered to their Monet method template. They have, for the most part, withheld that objective from the public. With a leveraged dollar still funding much of the world's region building, and with much of the American public still stubbornly independent-minded, albeit complacent, any premature indication of globalists' plans could crumble the economic and political Tower of Babel they are constructing. Some leaks of their intent have occurred, however. Among the mass of government documents released by WikiLeaks was this 2005 email from Paul Cellucci, U.S. Ambassador to Canada during the George W. Bush administration. Designated sensitive but unclassified, not for distribution outside USG, U.S. government channels. The email reviewed input he was receiving from Canadian financial, business, and academic leaders on how best to proceed towards North American integration, including the prospects for a common currency. Along with comments advocating the now adopted continental security perimeter and others favoring Monet's incremental approach, Cellucci accounts the comments of the governor of the Canadian Central Bank, the equivalent of the Federal Reserve Chairman of the United States. Cellucci writes, "The central bank governor has taken the position that monetary union is an issue that should be considered once we have made more progress toward establishing a single market. That day of a North American single market is fast approaching, as these globalists are working hard to build the infrastructure, both physical and regulatory mechanisms, to support deeper political and monetary integration.